Hey, hello guys. Welcome back to the discussion salon. If you're new, my name is Paul, and to the rest of my many subscribers, thank you all so much for subscribing. It does mean a lot to me. Just a few things to get over before I actually do the podcast. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for the time it's taken me to do this. To do this podcast, it is I've had a few problems which I need to go to hospital about, and also some personal problems. But yeah, I'm not going to say much about it on here, but everything is okay that way. Secondly, this is I won't be trying to put many images on here. The reason why I won't be trying to use many images is because of copyrights. Yeah, I found out many images are owned by several different companies and the press, and sometimes it's very hard to find public domain images. Um, which is the ones I could use, or creative license, or use other images. Then I have to credit the people to get this channel moving forward, which I'd like it to do. I'll be just mostly using public domain, which means nobody can get me for copyright issues. So do so yeah, that's the way. It may just be something I just won't see many images on here until I can get out and do some filming, and hopefully we can move forward from there. So I do apologise about that. I can't help that. It is something that I can't believe how many images are owned by two or three different companies. It is ridiculous, you know. But that's the way it is, and that's the way it is of this world. So I can't really complain about that. Also, I would like to invite people to join the channel's Patreon. It does help with the channel. It really does. It helps me to do some promotion. It helps me to go and do different stuff. And also, if people join, there is also a chance of winning some stuff. There's a chance of winning like a monetary prize, or a book involving history or a historical figure, or like a historical event. So any of those ones, if you join, it's only £5. £5? No, it's in dollars. It's $5 a month. That's all it is. So if you can join, I'd appreciate that. But also, if you don't, I understand. Money is tight. I'm finding it tight at the moment too. Anyway, so back to the video. What I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about an event in World War II that happened in a small village in Lancashire. I'm going to talk about the Battle of Bamberbridge that happened on the 24th of June to the 25th of June 1943. And it is a tale or a story about racial tensions in US military and the small Lancashire village's response to that. So if people don't know about where Bamberbridge is, Bamberbridge is a village which is in Lancashire, and it's 3 miles southeast of the city of Preston. It is in the borough of Riddle, and the population of the village as it is today is just over 12,000 people. As you see in time, villages grow, region population increases. Okay, so we're going to go back into time into 1943. We've got sorry, I'm stuttering. Okay, so we're going to go back in time, not 1943 to 1941. We're going to go to the 7th of December. It gives some pretext to what was being said. So, people who know history, people of World War II, Japan attacked the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941. This helped bring the US into the war. With this, with the US coming to the war, US forces started to move across to the bases in Britain. The first US division to land in Britain landed at Belfast, and there were the 34th Division, the Red Bull. And for the following months, more US troops and equipment came over to Britain, and this included the United States Army Air Force. which later became the 8th Air Force, and these came with 3 units: 8th Bomber, 8th Bomber Command, 8th Fighter Command, and the 8th Ground Air Services Command. With these units landing in the UK, pop-up airfields and bases started to spring up all over Britain to accommodate the US forces. One of these bases was called an Air Force Base 569, and that was nicknamed Adam Hill, and that was based near the village of Bamberbridge on the Monsey Road. The base is still there now. It has been used as an air cadet hut. For those people who don't know what air cadets is, it is okay. It is the RAF's youth equivalent. It's the youth equivalent to the RAF. You can join up, and you get to see what like the RAF would be like to be like. They also let you fly. They also let you shoot. Also do adventure training. You go away with them and visit different bases and do different things. I was in the air cadets myself. I had the I had well I took the chance where we had went down and visited a nuclear listening post that was near us. What the nuclear listening post was is members from the Royal Army Signal Corps would go down there and they would listen out. This is at the height of the Cold War, so they'd listen for these little points at this big bunker there in case of nuclear attack, and they would they have a siren, and they'd form the area that the events of a nuclear bomb is going to happen. But that's by the by. Okay, so the regiment that used the base was pardon me if I say it wrong, please forgive me. So the regiment that used the base was the 1511th Quartermaster Truck Regiment of the 8th Air Force. And to the north of the village, or to the north of Bamberbridge, was based the 234th Military Police Company, US. The duty of the 1511th was to ferry and deliver material to the surrounding bases, to the surrounding air bases, sorry. And because this was a logistical regiment, this is like a non-combat regiment, it was mostly staffed by African American personnel with incompetent, use the word, God, well, yeah, with incompetent and lackluster officers. Because this is an African American regiment, these officers were usually dumped onto them because they didn't really care much for them. There weren't any combat. They used to dump poorly trained, poor officers into these things. As it says, the unit was used for a dumping ground for these types of officers. Well, yeah, it's terrible. And this is because of the US Armed Forces were segregated. Jim Crow laws are still into effect, affecting the US Armed Forces. See, this is where the problem lies. Britain has never had a thing called Jim Crow laws. Don't be wrong. I'm not saying Britain there was no racism in Britain because that'd be absolutely wrong. There is racism in Britain, but there's no laws on segregation. We didn't have segregation in Britain. People, you can go freely travel. You may not have to get into some pubs if you're a certain persuasion. They may take an offence to you. They may tell you to get out, and that was happened to the 60s. But there was no official segregation. So the US commanders thought they could try to bring Jim Crow laws over to Bamberbridge. So they went round and asking local businesses not to serve the black soldiers and to keep them segregated. This annoyed the business owners, and in pubs and cafes, they would put signs up saying "Black troops only," because they were not going to get told what to do by a foreign body. They were fighting a war to stop a foreign body trying to tell people what to do. They weren't going to take it from the US commanders. So, like I said, they put up saying black troops only in the pubs and other businesses. So, racial tensions were quite high during this time in Bamberbridge between the US forces that were there. And this was only made worse when the 1511th heard about what happened in Detroit with the race riots. And this happened on the 20th to the 22nd of June. So on the night of the 24th of June, soldiers from the trucking regiment were drinking in the one of the pubs in Bamberbridge, and the pub's name was Ye Old. I've got to say that again, Ye Old Inn. Wow, don't know, I could get that wrong. And they were mixing and drinking with the locals, and they were mixing and drinking with British personnel, the women from from the auxiliary. Hold on, let us get this right. The auxiliary territorial service, and also there'd be a few British soldiers in the pub there having a drink too. So they're probably having a bit of a time. And in Britain, we've got a thing called last orders. Well, yeah, you know, last orders. Bell rings, not allowed to buy a drink. So the landlord or the barman or barmaid called last orders, and this is where the trouble happened. Reportedly, a young soldier tried to get a drink after last orders, and there was a little bit of trouble. This is nothing new in Britain. It happens most of the times. So the local MPs from the 254th were called, and two MPs came down, and there were names of Corporal Roy A. Windsor and Private Ralph F. Ridgway, and these MPs had a standing order. Then they were to arrest soldiers who were out of the camp without a pass, who were disorderly, and who were not in proper uniform. The trouble started when Windsor and Ridgway then attempted to arrest up a private from the trucking regiment, and he was a Private Eugene Nunn, and he was being arrested for being without a pass and not wearing the correct uniform. So with this happening, the tension spilled over, and there was an argument in the pub, and this involved the locals and the British personnel. Sorry, my. And one British soldier challenged the MPs by saying, "Why do you want to arrest them? They're not doing anything or bothering anybody." A staff sergeant in the trucking regiment, an African American staff sergeant, a William Byrd, helped to diffuse the situation, helped to diffuse the argument that was happening. The argument is getting a bit out of control, so he helped to diffuse it. But when the MPs left and they started up their jeeps and started to go on their jeeps, a bottle was produced and it was flung at the MPs and it smashed into the jeep. So with this, the MPs sped off and went to get more reinforcements. And after they collected them, they spoke to a Captain Julius Hurst and a Lieutenant Gerald C. Windsor, who then told the MPs to do their duty and arrest the soldiers. Sorry, I was thinking something else. So yeah, they got told to do their duty and to arrest the offending soldiers. And as the soldiers the from the trucking regiment were returning to the barracks, they were intercepted and ambushed by the MPs. A fight happened. The MPs were using billy clubs, and the soldiers from the 1511th started to use the bottles and cobblestones. And as the fight continued, an MP fired his weapon, and it struck an African American soldier, a Private Adams, injuring him during the fight. During the chaos and fighting that was happening, a rumor started that a soldier was shot in the back. The MP started to do a manhunt in response to these rumors, and 200 soldiers from the trucking regiment rallied at Adam Hill, Adam, yeah, Adam Hill, and confronted their superiors, and the soldiers called for a revolt. A lieutenant who was the only black African, it was the only African American officer of the 1511th, a Lieutenant Jones, temporarily pacified the men. But with the arrival of approximately a dozen more MPs in jeeps, and also an improvised armored personnel car with a machine gun, this led to the soldiers from the 1511th seizing the majority of firearms from Adam Hall and setting up the defensive positions round Bamber Bridge. They were also warned the locals not to come out, and if they heard anything, to stay indoors. So they waited till the small hours in the morning, and a few hours later, a gunfight ensued. And this is around the Bamber Bridge area, and a private from the 1511th was hit and killed, and he was a Private William Crossland, and he was struck in the back by a bullet, and he died there. He is buried at the Cambridge American Cemetery. He is buried at Plot F, Row 7. So if you ever come to England, if you're interested in this, and if you ever go to Cambridge, visit the War Cemetery there. He is buried there. And when during this gunfight, several other soldiers from the trucking regiment and MPs were injured during the battle. The battle did end at 4 a.m. So after the battle ended, the aftermath happened. So after the fighting ended, the blame was then put on the African American soldiers. The first trial of, of these soldiers ended with 4 African American soldiers being found guilty of various crimes which resulted in dishonorable discharges and hard labor. The second trial saw 28 out of the 35 soldiers being convicted on charges of ranging from ignoring orders, rioting, mutiny, and seizing firearms. I've got to say, no MPs were put on trial. No MPs were put on trial. No officers or MPs were put on trial during this period. So, in the press, this was they would the press was considerably censored from mentioning anything. So there was articles saying that that talked about violence happening in a town in the northwest part of England. That's most of what these articles said. When all of this came to pass, this all got to General Eaker, who was the commander of the 8th Air Force. When he heard about this and he seen what was happened, he put a large part of the blame on what happened on the racism that was about. He put the blame on the racist MPs and the officers and the language they used against these soldiers. He criticised the mishandling of the situation and also the neglect of the neglect of the injured. The response to this incident was swift, and there was a subsequent overhaul which led to the removal of all racist officers from the trucking regiment and introducing of African American officers into the MP units. This was a marking point in handling racial tension inside the US military. Now, this also did help. It did help morale. Morale among the US African American soldiers was low. This helped to improve it. It wasn't brilliant, but it helped to prove it. Court martial rates fell too. There was even there was still instances of black soldiers and white soldiers in U.S. forces in Britain, but there was none as big as Bamber Bridge. You know, you got to remember that during the 1940s, it wasn't a good time to be a person of color in America. Jim Crow's wars were about. The World War was happening, so soldiers, African American soldiers, were there in regiments. They were there doing their duty. They were there seeing their duty, but they were helping to free Europe from a certain race of a certain group of people. But then what they were coming back to was exactly what they were trying to stop. And this was a helping of a turning point during these times. This they showed that how Europe treated African American soldiers or people of color soldiers. Sorry, differently to how the US treated them. Like I said, don't get me wrong. There was still plenty of racism. We cannot deny that. But there wasn't any segregation. Segregation did not happen there. Unless you're in Germany, then that's another total different thing. But for the Allies, US forces were still segregated. And so things like this still happened. But we can learn from these mistakes. We can learn from what happened at Bamber Bridge. We could try to make it not happen again if there's any need to. Our God help that there's no need to have regiments in Britain or any wartime. There's no need for war. But that's for the powers to be. That's not for us to think. All we can do is just, I don't know, but waffling a bit. Anyway, the aftermath was there was no white soldiers prosecuted. Only the black soldiers were prosecuted, resulting death of one African American soldier. This was like I said, a turning point in racial tension, in equality. If everything happened as it was a small point, which led up to bigger things. And we can only learn and we can only strive to do better in our lives. Anyway, that is the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you can please listen to it, like, subscribe. Also, if you can you can join the Patreon. That'd be useful. And yeah, I wish you all a good day. I wish you all have a good one and a blessed day, and you all take care of each other. All right. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to strive to do better as I do more videos do more podcasts like this. Okay, you all take care now. Goodbye.